So there you see our curvy wall. And I'll just put a little wall on the end here. Just draw that right here, and I'll extrude this up to cover the end. I'll take care of that draft. Next, why don't we go around to the back side of the wall and work on maybe some other spaces, perhaps a kitchen on the first floor, and maybe some bedrooms on the top floor. I'm going back to my primitives to just kind of think about how I want this shape to look. I'll edit some of the controls, maybe bring in the radius a little bit. I can reduce the height of that. Let's say I want that to be a little bit more rounded. I could go back to my trusty round tool, change a radius here, click on this top segment and round that object. Another way I could create the same thing is to, let me delete this object first, and I'll bring on some profile lines that I have pre-drawn, and I'll use my revolve tool. This is like a lathe. You could use this to create a baseball bat or a wine glass perhaps. So you can see how I took my original profile line and revolved it around that axis. And you still have access to the control points or control lines of that original profile, so I can edit the shape by changing the original profile line. It has remembered what was made with it. Next, I want to build some dormers off of this for my bedroom, so I've pre-drawn a series of profile lines. I'll go to a wireframe here and I'll select those so you can see them all. They're highlighted in red there. I'll go to my NURBS tool, and this will actually wrap a skin over those lines. There we go. So there's our dormer. And since it's a NURBS object, it has plenty of control points that I can use to tweak that shape. So let me just select some of these, and I'll just stretch those out. Maybe forward about to there. I can add a railing by turning on two more profile lines that I've drawn, and I can loft a surface in between those. Let's say we want to make some openings in this railing. It's a NURBS surface, which means I can actually draw openings directly onto the surface. See, I'm drawing a little closed shape there. And there we have a hole. Now let's say you want to do multiple holes at once. You can actually draw some closed shapes off on the ground there. Select those. Select the object you want them to go on. Go back to my NURBS tool and change an option to Map Existing Curve. And then I'll just click in my workspace and it will zap all those up onto the wall at once. Let me go up to a top view, and I'll select that dormer and railing, and I'm going to make a couple copies of this at the same time that I'm rotating these objects. So let me set the center point and the end point, and there I have several copies of my dormer. I'll go back to a bird's eye view. Notice that the dormers and the original object don't really have any relation. They're just kind of intersecting each other. Well, if I want, I can trim one object with another and vice versa, and also radius the intersection in between the two. You see a little rounded edge now between where those two objects intersected, and they're cut into one another. Now if I were to take this a couple steps further and add a little bit more detail, I would get something about like this I have on a pre-made layer. You can see I've added some glass, some mullions, a scale figure, and even some windows down in the kitchen. That's a bit funkier style of architecture than maybe it's very common, but you can at least see the power of the modeling tools in Form Z. Well, how about I spin around to the front and work on the patio? What I'll do is cut some volume from this this surface. So let me select this face, and I'll go to my subtract volume tool, and I'm going to pull out my drawing palette here, and you'll notice that I'm going to switch back and forth between several different types of lines. I'll start with a vector line. I'll switch over to an arc. I'll go back to a vector line and then return to an arc. Some programs won't let you do multiple types of lines at once. You have to draw them as separate objects and then join them later. Form Z allows you to just seamlessly go back and forth between smooth and faceted line types as you're drawing. So I'll complete that line, extrude that downwards. Next, let's do the bottom portion of the patio. I'm going to use my arc for this as well. So I'll draw a couple arcs in here. Go back to my vector line to close this line off. And extrude that downwards to cut the rest of the volume away. So now we have a little two-tiered patio. Let's say we want some staircase to go down from the top level to the bottom. Well, just to demonstrate that first, I'm going to draw a little path. If you've never built a staircase, it's about like watching paint dry. So what I'll do is draw a line. We actually have a tool that allows you to build a staircase very quickly, eliminating that kind of boring work. So you just draw a path, you can set a few options, and boom, you have a staircase. So that saves you tons of boring work. It's even parametric, so I can go back in and change some of these options if it's not quite to how I want. I can add tiles to the treads, I can add railings of different kinds, so you can see how quickly I generated that staircase. Alright, now let me delete that because it's not how I want. I actually want a staircase that will conform to the arc of this one wall. So I can actually build a staircase by picking a segment in an existing object. So I'll just grab this bottom segment here and I'll just make a staircase that goes from the bottom tier up to that top level. You can see a little gap there. I'll just use my extend tool again. You saw me do this a bit ago at the beginning of this demonstration. So I'll just pick the face I want to move and then the face I want that to move to. So there we have a quick staircase. Next, let's create some forms that kind of radiate outwards from this other arc. I'm going to use another primitive, a cube, and I've preset some dimensions here. I'll just pop a cube right there. And next I want a path along which to copy this cube, so I'll choose this segment and I'm going to use my parallel offset, and so I'll make a little duplicate segment there to use as a path, and I'll go to my place along path tool and I want to set this to make a few duplicates. Actually, maybe I'll set this to 6. So I'll select the object and the path, and it will make 6 duplicates. Now these aren't just your traditional duplicates. They're actually what we call clones, which means any change I make to one of the clones will propagate through all of its siblings. So if I were to move a segment of this object upwards, you'll notice that that change gets reflected in the other clones. So this is great for architecture where you're typically doing repetitive kinds of elements. So if you have an entire colonnade and all the columns are clones and you decide you want to change the look of one clone, you don't have to copy that change through the rest of the colonnade. It just happens. And this applies to moving topology. It applies to boolean unions. Any change you make to one clone, and it doesn't have to be any one particular clone, just any of them, will go through the rest of them. This also applies to color changes, so I can color a face of this as glass. Maybe I'll do another face. You can unclone objects at any time as well. So if you wanted to make changes to one and have that not affect the rest of them, you can remove that feature. I'll union all these spaces together to create one space.